Today we're going to talk about Joseph. Now Joseph I talked a little bit about on Father's Day. I zoned in on one chapter. Today I'm going to sum up all 15. So get back, settle in. What time's the game on? 1 o'clock. Oh, I have till 1. Great. I kid. I'm going to sum up 15 chapters. We'll read 3 sections of it, all right? So I'm going to kind of tell you the story of Joseph. But you remember the promise that God gave to Abraham. Abraham, one of our forefathers of Christianity, one of the patriarchs, God told Abraham that out of him would come many, many descendants and a great nation. Well, the promise fulfilled we find in Joseph. Okay? Joseph is one of 12 sons to Jacob. How many of you would be excited about that? 12 sons to 4 women. Yeah, that's how they did things in the Old Testament. I don't recommend this. I've told you this before. Men, you can only handle one wife. I'm just saying. Sister wives are a bad idea. That's exactly what Jacob has. Right? Remember, he has Leah and Rachel and 2 maidservants. And his beloved wife, Rachel, the woman he worked for 14 years for, has the youngest 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And out of these 12 sons come the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why it's important that we know that there were 12 sons. Joseph, because he was born to Rachel, becomes the favored son. Okay, also something I don't recommend. Like, love all your kids. They can take, did I just go out? How did I go out?
You moderate for that?
I don't know. It's possible. I'll just keep going while we try to fix this. Oh, it went dead. That's exactly what happened. I'm just going to hand this off to Emily while I keep talking. Thank you. Joseph becomes the favored child, and Joseph's 10 older brothers are working in the fields with the flocks, right? So they're working, and Joseph, now we know through the 15 chapters that where the story of Joseph unfolds, that Joseph has a lot of integrity, a lot of character. We don't see a lot of downfalls. I'm back on. With Joseph, now I'm really loud. Ted will fix that. But there's one thing about Joseph that's, a little problem, and that is he's the annoying little brother. Did you ever have an annoying little sibling?
Yes.
Or were you the annoying little sibling? Now, I'm the oldest. I told a story about Becky in the first service. She's in here now. So I'm like, so I tell a story about Dan who's not in here.
Just tell them all.
I'm going to tell them all. So, I, as the oldest, of course, some of you oldest children will understand, we're the perfect ones. Tara, you understand. Dirk was the oldest child. And when you grew up in a Free Methodist pastor's family, back in the 80s, you didn't have a lot of money. And so all pastors' families drove a Reliant K or a Chevette. Dirk's nodding his head. And that was before vans. I'm aging myself. I'm old people. No vans. I think we got the first van when you were in high school, maybe. And there was no third seating in the station wagon. You just piled up in the back. But we didn't have enough money for a station wagon, so we had a Reliant K or a Corvette. Not a Corvette, Chevette. Corvette sounds really good.
A little different at your
like
age.
that. Yeah, my dad was at the rich church. No, I'm kidding. So we had to squeeze. There's 3 of us, right? So we're squeezed in the back seat, and Becky by default always got in the middle seat because she was the middle child, and according to all middle children, their lives are terrible. So Becky's life is really hard, and sometimes she describes our house growing up, and I'm like, were we in the same house? But she was the persecuted middle one, and so this is what Becky would do. She would tap you on the shoulder. Did you ever have anyone do that to you? Now listen, this is maybe I should have given you this warning a long time ago, but don't ever do that to me because my reflex might be to do this. Okay, so I advise against not doing that to me. But so Joseph becomes, he's kind of a little bit annoying. So he's reporting back to his daddy and tattling about all the bad things that his brothers were doing, which makes them hate him even more. Then daddy gives Joseph this beautiful coat. You remember the Joseph and the coat of many colors. He gets gifted this beautiful coat. And, sometimes we give our kids gifts, but we should, take turns. If we're going to give them something special, maybe the next kid should get the next something special. So now Joseph has a target on his back, literally, with this beautiful coat. Then, to add to the problem, Joseph has a dream. And I can't read you the whole dream, but here's the gist of the dream. He has a dream that someday his 10 siblings will bow down before him. Now listen, I don't know what kind of dreams you have. These are not the kind of dreams that I have. But if I were to have this, it might be wise if I did not tell Danny and Becky that one day they bow down to me. That's where maybe Joseph could have used a little tact. Yeah, everything that goes in your mind should not come out. Just a little hint for Joseph. So now his brothers really hate him. So they decide, the first thought was let's kill him. Then they decide to sell him into slavery. So they sell Joseph to some passing Ishmaelites, and they sell Joseph into slavery in Potiphar's house. And if you know Potiphar, or some of you might know that name, Potiphar is an official for Pharaoh, the king. Okay? And Potiphar really, really ends up liking Joseph. So he puts Joseph in charge of everything in his household. I feel like I need a Joseph. It says right in the scripture that the only thing Potiphar had to worry about was what to eat. That sounds like a grand plan. I often say I need a wife to help me out with stuff, I don't really mean it that way, but people to help you, right? But someone to help you. So I need a Joseph in my life. If anyone wants to help me, just only have to worry about eating. The job is open. The pay is my gratitude, but So he's placed in charge of everything, things are going fine, until Potiphar's wife one day looks over and goes, well, he's mighty handsome. All the kids are gone, right? All right. And so she decides, I'm going to have me some of Joseph. You know what I mean. And Joseph's like, And I talked about this on Father's Day. Joseph runs away. He's like, now, this is what all good people should do when temptation is staring them in the face. I mean, she is offering herself to him, and he's like, bye. So he gets out of town, he runs away, but she keeps his cloak. So now there's false allegations. Joseph ends up in prison. Failure of the justice system, right? He's in jail for 2 years. He's a young man, okay? So he's this young man. He finds favor in the prison with the warden. So the warden puts him in charge of everything, and now the only thing the warden has to worry about is what to eat. I need a Joseph. So, sometime along the way, Pharaoh gets angry at his cupbearer and his baker. Now, here's a job for you. So you know what a baker does, right? They bake. Stating their face here, people. And the cupbearer, what in the world is a cupbearer? Now, here, this is an actual job. This is somebody's full-time job. Their job is to drink of the cup of the king before placing it in front of the king, so that if someone's trying to poison the king, the cupbearer will die instead of the king. That's his job. Now, to be a cupbearer, you're actually a very trusted employee of the king. I don't know what they did, but Pharaoh gets mad at them, throws them in jail. These two men they have dreams. They have two dreams. They each have a dream. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read one dream to you today. There's multiple dreams in the story, but they say, well, there's this young man named Joseph. He might be able to interpret your dreams. And he says to them, well, the baker's going to die, and the cupbearer is going to be reinstated into his job as cupbearer. There's a job we should all aspire to. I'm the cupbearer to the king. And he says, Joseph says to the cupbearer, please remember me to Pharaoh. Like, remind him that I'm still stuck in here for something I didn't do. So, that's what happens. The cupbearer goes back to his job, but he forgets Joseph. So think about the place that Joseph finds himself in this story. Okay? He has been betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, falsely imprisoned, and now he's been abandoned by the cupbearer. So he's still in jail. I'm sure that all of you in this set of circumstances would be going, I can't wait to see what God's going to do. The truth is, most of us would be sitting there angry, and with good reason, wondering where God was, wondering what was happening, what is going on. Well, then Pharaoh had a dream, 2 dreams. And all of a sudden, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. This is a couple of years later. So they call Joseph to Pharaoh, and this is what happens. Genesis 41, 25 to 35, if you want to follow along in your Bibles. Genesis 41, 25 to 35. Joseph tells him what the dreams mean. He says this to Pharaoh. The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. And the 7 good heads of grain, the dreams are about grain and cows. Okay? I'm sure those are dreams you all wish you could have. I wish I could dream about a cow. The 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years. And so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. So you see what's happening here? Joseph gives a pretty clear explanation. Egypt is going to have 7 years of abundance. The fields are going to be great. The harvest is going to be great. There's going to be an abundance of food. We're all going to be taken care of. It's going to be wonderful 7 years. But after that 7 years, there's going to be a devastating famine for 7 years where you will forget all the good stuff you have, because now it's going to be terrible. You're going to have nothing. So he's warning them. Make plans. Be prepared. Save some of the harvest each year so that you can get through the 7 years of famine. So he says to Pharaoh, appoint a guy. Well, Joseph becomes the guy. Okay, so for 7 years, Joseph is to help Egypt for the coming famine. He is to prepare them, store food, organize how the relief effort would go, and when the famine hits, it hits really, really hard, and it hits Egypt and all the surrounding areas. So it's really, really bad. We pick up the story of Joseph's family in this chapter. Joseph's family, his father, his 11 brothers, are part of the abundance and then the famine. They get through 2 years of the famine, and Jacob says to his sons, I want you to go to Egypt and find this guy who's been preparing for the famine and buy us some food. Do you remember that dream that Joseph had? that his brothers would one day bow down to him. So here's what happens. Now it's really hard to sum up what happens because there's a lot of twists and turns. I'm giving you the cliff notes today, okay? Because I want to get to the point. But Joseph's brothers, 10 of them. Now Jacob says, the 10 oldest will go, and Benjamin's staying with me. Because he's now the beloved son of Rachel, the only one left that he believes, because Jacob has been told all these years that Joseph is dead. So he sends the 10 brothers to Egypt, says, go and buy us some grain so that we might get through these years. They show up before Joseph, and what do? They bow down before him. Joseph, of course, knows who they are, but they do not recognize him, so he decides to remain just the guy. And he puts them in jail for 3 days, telling them that they are spies. He finds out about their family. He asks about the family. Finds out his father's still alive, that Benjamin is still alive, and that Benjamin is home with Jacob. So he decides to let them go home, but only if they will say that they will come back with the brother, with Benjamin. So he keeps one of the sons behind and sends them all home. And when they stop for rest on the journey home, they find that Joseph has repaid them what they paid for the grain, and now there's silver in their bags. Like panic ensues because now they think Jacob is going to think that they stole from him. They go back. He sends them back, says, bring me back your brother. They go back. Jacob's like, we are not sending Benjamin back. So the other brother sits in prison for quite a while, waiting. Finally, they run out of food, so they send all 11 brothers are sent back to Egypt to try to get more food, and they take back all the things that they had put in the bags, the silver and stuff that had been put in the bags. Eventually, Joseph reveals himself to his brother. This is where we pick up the story in Genesis 45. Joseph says to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now listen, I don't know about you, but if I have some brothers show up in front of me that have betrayed me, sold me, treated me badly, I had conflict with, I wouldn't be like, well, it was just God's will. I mean, I know some of you would because you're spiritual and closer to God than me, but I would be like, suckers. I mean, isn't that human nature, the temptation? All of us have been betrayed by somebody in our lives. All of us have had somebody do something horribly painful to us. Like the unimaginable, some of you have been through some really tough stuff in relationships. And if that person that hurt you and betrayed you and abandoned you and did all these terrible things to you, if they showed up in front of you and you had power to make them pay for it, wouldn't you want them to? I mean, that's reality. Now, we hope that God changes us, right? That God will give us mercy. But here's Joseph being able to have the perspective of saying, I know that these last 20 years, now we're reading this entire passage in 5 minutes, but this was 20 years of injustice done to Joseph until these last, 7 years when he's been in the favor again of the Pharaoh. He's able to look at that last 20 years and say, God had a purpose in all of this. I will admit that when I'm in the trenches of tough stuff, I don't necessarily sit back and go, I just can't wait to see how God just brings all this together. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing. I'm like, why hasn't God given me a The entire family comes, Pharaoh gives them land to live on. I mean, I might forgive you, but I'm not giving you presents. Christmas is canceled. But I might be able to find it in myself to forgive you, because that's better for me, but I'm not giving you land to live on, and building you a house, and giving you this plush place to live, and making sure you make it through the family. That is what Joseph does. In chapter 49, Jacob gathers his sons together, and he prays a blessing over each one of them, and then he dies. At this time, the brothers really panic, because they're thinking, maybe Joseph has only, been nice to us because of our father. And here's what happens in the last chapter of the book of Genesis, chapter 50, starting at verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God?" And now here's one of the most famous verses in Scripture, and I'm not sure if we all knew. It came from the story of Joseph. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. People who come to you who have hurt you, caused you pain, 20 years of injustice, of being alone, separated from your brothers and your father, and he says, "You meant all of this for bad." Now, nobody could say about the brothers, "Well, maybe they didn't mean to be mean. Maybe their intent, if we look deep, we'd see a good intention." They were bad. The brothers did this on purpose. Sometimes people do harm us and they don't mean it. It's a flippant remark, it's something so I'm sure that I've hurt people and not intentionally, but this was intentional. They didn't accidentally sell Joseph into slavery. It was like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. This was intentional malice. And here is Joseph saying to them, you did intend this to harm me, but God intended it for good. How many of us would struggle with being in that place? So here are some things we can learn from the story of Joseph. I have about 6 things we can learn. I'll sum this up quick here. First, dare to dream. Some of us are big dreamers, and you dream big dreams. Some of us are too afraid to dream big. Sometimes God gives us a dream, and we're afraid to do it, or we think it can't possibly happen, or that's never going to happen, and so we stop dreaming. Now, this dream that Joseph had was from God. His dream told him that his brothers would bow down to him. And I wonder if when Joseph was in jail, if he was sitting there going, I wonder what that dream was about. Was it just a weird dream that how many of you have ever had a weird dream? I've had weird dreams. I was sharing with Alice Eater's family. The day before Alice died, I had this dream. It was so vivid. And I never had vivid dreams, but I had this dream that she threw this enormous party, and she invited me, and your family was all like feeding me great food, and I woke up going, I hope I'm invited to that party. But Alice actually had parties like that, so I feel like, your family does that. But sometimes you have weird dreams, right? I hope that didn't mean anything, because that's weird. But this was a dream that God gave to Joseph. It was a prophecy of what was going to happen. Do you think he ever wondered about the dream? Wondered if it was a promise from God that was never going to be fulfilled? Wondered what in the world was God doing? Wondered where God God was when it all fell apart? You know, I've done that a lot where I sit and I look around me and I go, God, what are you doing? You know, I thought I heard from you about this, but now this is happening. It doesn't make any sense. What are you doing? But Joseph shows us that we can dream big. Secondly, he shows us something that's really hard for me. Don't get discouraged by your circumstances. That's great advice coming from me. I get it. I see the irony. Right? Right? Like, when we're in really bad circumstances, some of you are like, it's going to be fine. Some of you totally have trust in God. And I'm like, stomping my feet like a toddler. Why isn't God fixing this? Why isn't he doing what he said? I don't really get encouraged by bad circumstances. And yet Joseph shows us that we can get through difficult circumstances, that even in the middle of discouragement, God is still there. He reminds us that as we walk through difficult circumstances, we can have integrity. This is what I talked about on Father's Day, was walking with integrity. It's hard for us to find people that really have integrity these days, isn't it? This is the world's complaint about the church. Oh, they're all a bunch of people who say one thing and do another. I don't think that's entirely true. I think there's a lot of God-fearing people who really try to live the gospel, but we still fail. And unfortunately, some of the more highly known people, that's not a word, have failed. Right? Walk with integrity. I'm going to skip one because we're going to run out of time. Depend on God. Know that God can use your circumstances, even if the circumstances are not all good, to do great things. Remember that God has a purpose. There's another verse in Scripture that's similar to the one we read in Genesis 50, where it says, you intended this for bad, but God intended it for good. Romans 8:28 says this, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I was in my Bible study last week with my small group, and we were talking about prayer. And we were talking about, one of the questions that we kind of tossed around for a minute was, have you ever had God say no to a prayer and you knew later it was the right thing? Oh, God was protecting me from this. Or God was saving me from this. Here is a time when Joseph is able to look back at all the things he'd been through and say, God worked out all those bad circumstances and he made them, work them out into a good thing. It is hard to see when we're in the middle of it. You know, it just is. It's hard to remember that God can take the circumstances of our lives and turn them into good. You know, I remember when our family first got moved to Pittsburgh, there was nothing good about that in our minds. Right? We were like, this is the worst thing we've ever gone through in our entire life. And I remember our family kind of took different slants on it. Some people said, well, this was totally God's will. And I was like, this was man's will. This was one person who decided he was going to do what he wanted, and this is where we ended up. And we're in this stupid place called Pittsburgh. Right? My brother and sister had to start, Becky was in 11th grade, starting over in 11th grade. Dan was in middle school. I lost a ton of my college tuition because my parents went from the state I was in college in to Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if it would have been nice or not, but I was tempted to send someone the bill for that. I didn't. I rose above it. I didn't always. But in the moment, it seemed like the worst thing, and it probably was in that time in our lives. We did not have that many horrible things happen to us. Some of you are going, that was nothing, you little loser. We've gone through way worse than one here. But at that time, it felt like the worst thing that could ever happen to us. And yet now, you know, we're 24 years past it. I can say now that God can take what people do and turn it into something good. I mean, I met Dirk. I know.
Oh, so nice.
Dan ended up going 4 years of on a full ride to college with a sport that our other school didn't even offer. Like, we can look back and say, okay, God led us to Monacrest, can't complain about that, right? God worked it out to do good things with a situation that we didn't want, we didn't welcome, we didn't like. And yet God was able to take all of those things and bring good into it. I know that some of you are in a place right now where you're going, where does God do something special in this? You're looking at it and go, I just don't get it. I don't get it. And you might not ever. But God does give us this promise that he will work things out for something special. God had something special in mind for Joseph, even when the circumstances weren't good. We're going to close with formal communion this morning. Of course, the last thing Joseph shows us is forgiveness. We saw a pretty remarkable act of forgiveness this week on the news. I'm sure you've seen it with the young man who forgave the woman who killed his brother. We should want justice and forgiveness, right? We're going to talk about justice in the next 5 weeks, quite a bit. He offers forgiveness. If we look at the life of Jesus was not always great, was it? You could look at the circumstances of Jesus' life and go, they don't make any sense. And yet, his life all culminated in going to the cross to forgive us